Hey everyone, Danielle and Jennifer here. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. We are really excited to connect with you today to talk about trauma and how it can influence your path. This is actually video 3 of a 4-part video series that we've been collaborating on in regard to personal development. So we are again really excited to have this conversation today. And for those of you who may be seeing me for the first time, I'm Jennifer Spohr, and I'm an Akashic Records channel, soul-led business mentor, and strategist for leaders who are ready to step into next level potentiality in their purpose and mission. And I have with me the amazing Danielle Grant. Danielle, do you want to intro yourself?
I'd love to. Thanks for having me on here again today. I'm excited that we're in the third part of this series. My name is Danielle Grant, and I'm the founder of The Spiritual Room, which is a online and offline space helping you expand your consciousness as we awaken and ascend on the new earth. And I'm just excited to be here today. I love how you presented that. We're expanding the personal development conversation. That's exactly what we've been doing.
Yes, we are. And I was just trying to share something on here, feeling a bit technically challenged. So I'm not going to worry about it right now. It is what it is. So, hey, anyone who has joined us, please be sure to say hello. And if you're watching the replay, be sure to let us know that as well. So, wow, where do I start? The first thing I really definitely want to share, just to kind of put the magnitude or like the enormity of this conversation into perspective, is I actually read a study last night
Mm-hmm.
uh, that was done in over 20 countries, and that reported 70% of people have experienced at least one traumatic event in their lives, and over 30% have experienced 4 or more, which is pretty staggering to me. But it's even higher than that, right? Because there are so many traumatic events that people can experience that aren't even reported. I just want to say hello to Kimberly Albert. Hi.
Hi, Kim.
Thanks for joining us.
Nice to
So,
see
I
you,
mean,
Kim.
that's a pretty crazy statistic, isn't it?
That is a crazy statistic.
Yeah, it really is. And the reason why Danielle and I wanted to talk about this today is because this trauma can really have a huge influence on your path. And because what happens is so many people are conditioned to believe that, being vulnerable is showing a sign of weakness, sharing your experiences, is a sign of weakness. And so a lot of people actually have experiences that they suppress. And what happens is when we aren't able to be in a space where we're processing our experiences, that energy becomes stored in our field, in our cellular memory, in our cells, and it can show up in various ways in our lives. And so, whether it's struggling to achieve goals, not feeling, worthy or deserving, um, there are just so many different ways that it shows up. Let me know your thoughts.
I was just thinking as you were talking about this, how this conversation is definitely
Mm-hmm.
in your wheelhouse, specifically in the Akashic Records, because the whole conversation and point of this series for us was to bridge this gap between personal development and the spiritual side and the soul path. And all these traumas that we're talking about suppressing and these statistics and people experiencing these things. That's the very essence of what this is all about. Right. And that's what we're awakening to, is the fact that we have these records, Akashic records, that help us understand a lot of our traumas and why we have them, why we're experiencing them. But we first have to understand that
Mm-hmm.
trauma, is part of the soul design, right? It's part of the human experience. It's what we're here to have. And when we can start to identify it and not suppress it, but welcome it and understand it, that's when we start to see things really shift for us as a human, but also within our soul alignment. So I'm so glad we're talking about this, because
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking, like, this is what people are awakening to. This is actually the whole point of us doing this series, was to bridge this gap. And this is one of the best ones because everyone associates trauma. right? But that's the awakening of our Akashic, of our awareness of that. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree with that. Trauma is absolutely an experience, one of the experiences on our journey, and our experiences have a lot to do with shaping who we are, who we become, and the working in the Akashic records are very powerful because you really can step into a space where you're able to heal and transmute those experiences. Um, and when you can get to the point on your journey where you're in a space that, as you said, that you understand that whatever you've experienced, however impactful to you it may have been, because that's unique for everyone, and it's really important to be sensitive to that, I think. But when you can get into a space where you understand how that experience actually contributes to your journey, it's a game changer.
It is a
And
game
to
changer.
understand that, I wanted to acknowledge and say hi to Shannon. I showed her comment on there and I was just on a roll. So, hey, Shannon, thanks for joining us. She's saying trauma is also impure physical manifestations. Absolutely. And we'll definitely get into that. I wanted to just add and say that when you can get to a place on your journey that you really understand that as having an experience that contributes to your path, and that you're not, in fact, unworthy or undeserving. There's no part of you that's missing. You are a whole, sovereign, divine being, and that your experiences in your life don't primarily define you. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's so powerful for people to lean into, that
Mhm.
they don't define us. And in fact, the higher lens, the spiritual lens, is that everything's happening for us to deliver us to that greater desire that we have, which is everything that we desire. But the only way to get to those places are where we have experiences, because trauma is so much of a lot of our pivotal points in all of our journeys. If you look at them, there's some sort of trauma within them, right? And so obviously within our physical reality, that's how we can awaken ourselves to pivot, is trauma. And that's why we want to remove ourselves from it, being of the trauma, instead of, oh, the trauma is happening so I can get to the next place, right? So
Absolutely.
I love how you were saying that. Yeah. And like Shannon
Absolutely.
says, they can appear in physical manifestations, and that appears so differently for everybody, but it more often than not appears in a
Mhm.
physical manifestation. So I love that she shared that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this, another reason why I felt so passionate about sharing this conversation with you about it is because it's something that's largely glossed over in the personal development industry. And and I feel like it's just really important for us to acknowledge it by having this conversation, and
Yeah.
how it contributes to your growth journey. And it's I'm also feeling guided to mention, when it comes to personal development, money is a great example, because there is all this manifestation, all of this info that's out in the ethers about, oh, just do this step and that step and this step, and you're going to receive the results that you desire. But I think we talked about this maybe in our first video or in our manifesting video, about how that's barely scratching the surface. Essentially, if you're someone who has experienced some traumatic events, that can have an adverse effect on your ability to attract the kind of income or opportunities that you desire, which goes back to, the comment that Shannon made about how it does appear in physical manifestation. And basic steps around manifesting, and even some of the courses and programs that exist out in the industry in regard to, making the income that you want in the business, and all of the talk that's out there about it, may not produce the results that you desire if you're someone who has experienced some traumatic events that need to be processed. Because a lot of times there can be, deeper energetics and things going on that you might not be aware of at a conscious level, which again is a great reason to be able to go into your Akashic records, because that has all of the information for your soul, not just your incarnation here, but other incarnations that you've experienced, which can also sometimes be a factor. And it's really just insightful to be able to go in and have access to any of that information to help you bring to light whatever it is that you feel like may be holding you back.
This is just such an expanded conversation because well, it is really, because someone could be listening to this on the Akashic record side, and that's the whole fifth dimensional conversation. And that's,
Mhm.
if you're there, you're awakening to it, or you know about it, and you know that's what's happening. So you're most likely moved beyond this idea of trauma. You understand what it's about. You're, aware of the Akashic record. You're using it to fulfill a soul purpose. But
Yeah.
the other side of it is the third dimensional reality, which is the one that everyone's awakening beyond. And that's the point of these conversations that we've been having, is to shift beyond kind of what isn't being shown. And like you talked about with those programs, and if you still have that trauma, you're out of alignment with that desire. It's not even that, it's that you're energetically not in alignment with receiving that. For whatever reason, the trauma has you wrapped up in that space and that vibration. And that's that third D conversation. The personal development conversation is a 3D conversation. So this is an expansive conversation in the sense that, yeah, like trauma is part of the soul's journey and evolution. And when you go into the Akashic record, there's so much clarity in there. But also there's the other side where you're just awakening to it and you're like, okay, I'm kind of wanting to break free from this 3D reality. And that's this conversation, right? I am not my trauma. The trauma is happening for a reason, and it's to fulfill a greater purpose. And what is that? And I'm awakening to that now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that you meant that you acknowledge that it's an expansive conversation, because there are people that are in different places on their path as well. And like you said, at the end of the day, uh, it's an experience, that's part of our path that does serve a purpose, a higher purpose for us in our path, and being able to gain clarity around that, and to just process that is priceless in terms of our ascension. Um, yeah, so all encompassing, so very expansive. I think people define trauma in different ways too. And I think that that is unique to someone's journey. In my experience, a lot of people also even spiritual leaders, tend to minimize their own experiences and how they feel that they impact their path.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like a lot of times that's more of a version of suppression. I know, especially maybe for people who are listening from the LinkedIn platform as well, workplace trauma is a very real thing.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma from working with other coaches and mentors, maybe even therapists, that haven't ended up being aligned or working out, is a very real thing as well. There are just so many different ways that it can show up.
Yeah, and I think now's a good opportunity to begin to shift the conversation and dialogue around the term trauma, right?
Mhm.
Because as we awaken, we understand there's a subconscious mind, and whatever the subconscious mind knows to be true is what we know to be true. And so we've we've evolved into a society where trauma is a really intense word. And like you said, everyone has a unique experience. It's different at every level. There's workplace, there's home place, there's relations, there's all kinds of trauma, there's self trauma. But the word trauma is a 3D word. The word trauma is something that fires us up and ignites things inside of us. And so we need to even elevate and expand beyond that in the same conversation of this being an expansive conversation. Yes, we all have trauma, but the greater spiritual part of that and the Akashic record conversation is it's happening to bring you to a greater purpose and thing anyways.
Mhm.
So how do we ascend beyond it? Well, it's starting to shift it from always looking at it as trauma. You begin to look at it like, oh, that was a stepping stone. That was the moment that woke me up,
Yes.
right?
Yes, looking at it.
Detachment. Yeah.
Yes, looking at it as a stepping stone, awareness being that first initial step to making that paradigm shift, but then also having the willingness to make the shift.
Yeah.
It sounds really simple in concept, but some people do feel challenged in regard to letting go of that because they've actually gotten into a comfort zone in terms of just it's amazing to say this, but it really does happen. If someone's used to not achieving what they desire or feeling worthy or feeling deserving, it can also feel scary. It can instill fear in someone to be able to actually take the leap to make that paradigm shift, because that involves obviously creating new neural pathways to adapt to different behaviors. And again, that's where working in the records can be tremendously helpful, because beyond just gaining clarity and awareness of information, you can also experience a quantum leap in energetic shifts and release, because we don't always, there's a time and place to get into our story and details of experiences that we've had, but sometimes you're able to, with just the willingness to heal and to grow, you're able to do that through just being willing to make that energetic shift. And so it's really important to know. I think a lot of people, have been conditioned to believe or taught that we always need to get into the depth of the story behind everything in order to move forward. And that's not always the case. Sometimes you can just be willing to make the decision that you're ready to shift.
I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people do have that perception. And that's something that anyone who listens to Abraham Hicks hears them channel consistently is there doesn't need to be some traumatic story that you work through in order to get to the other thing. You just have to acknowledge it and see it, and then decide to shift it and be in the other place. And that's what you're saying of the energy shift and the paradigm shift. But it is scary to people that aren't used to it. Like her name's over here, Amy said, or being bullied in the workplace. That's who it says LinkedIn user on our end, but it's so true. And what those opportunities offer us is they are traumatic and to any capacity, but they offer us the ability to have awareness that, there's an aspect of me that was put in that place. What do I need to extract from it? What do I need to see? It's not that I'm less than or they're less than, but why am I in this experience, right? The observation is the thing that allows the awakening and the timeline to collapse. And to just no longer be in that traumatic story. But I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people think that that's a thing, like I have to do all this work in my experience, and that's not true at all. There's different modalities, but also things shift at different levels of your spiritual truth and different levels of your own consciousness. So what changes quick for one person might take a long time to change for another, specifically when we're talking energetic shifts. Everyone's different too. But yeah, like this whole conversation on trauma is the same thing with the word, is it's so drawn out and it's such a big deal, but it doesn't have to be like that if we don't want it to be.
Yeah. I just feel guided to mention, it's really just even us having this conversation again is so tremendous, because the topic it gets glossed over. It's becoming a buzzword, trauma, and it's important that we're having this conversation about it. Above and beyond anything, my desire for us having this conversation and the others that we've had is for people to feel like they can acknowledge, their experiences, and if they're feeling like, they're struggling with moving past this, to be able to reach out to receive the support that they need to start becoming an energetic match for what it is that they desire, because there's still a lot of shame around people feeling like they can share their experiences. And there is a lot of controversy, I guess I'll call it, out there in terms of how these experiences should be treated from a support perspective. Some people feel that the only way is traditional licensed, therapy, and that can be helpful. And I have clients who work with me and have a therapist that they work with. I really feel like that's a very personal decision. Because in some cases, working with a healer, working in the Akashic records, to make those shifts, working with a coach can bring you the results that you desire. And I know that that is our next conversation that we're getting into in a couple weeks. Next week, we're taking a break. But then we will be picking back up to discuss, the ability to be discerning in terms of the support that you're reaching out for and how to make sure that you're actually investing and working with someone who is a great fit for you. I know I just said a whole mouthful there.
I'm just glad we're having this conversation. I'm just glad that this is what we're talking about and people are exposed to this kind of stuff. Like you said, everyone is different, and there's nothing wrong with the traditional way. It's just that there's so much more of an understanding of that experience, of that healing journey facilitated by somebody who's in that arena. But I think those that we are speaking to and those that are attracted to us are people who are awakening to that there's something greater beyond what that education system offers you. And that's this Akashic record and the soul understanding. It's just so important that we're doing this, and it's obviously resonating with people, which is amazing. And so I'm excited to even talk about the next one next week, which is really, knowing that discernment, but it's really all about learning how to understand what your heart vibrations are telling you. And that's kind of the next aspect of even this conversation, the trauma, right? When we're in it, you feel anxious, you feel it in your chakra system, you feel it within your being that things are out of alignment. You're stressed out, right? Physical manifestations even. So it's good that we're continuing this conversation of learning how to talk about the energetics too and the vibration of everything.
Yeah,
because we've been weaving in and out of all this, right?
Yes, yeah, everything is energy. Everything is energy. Listen, if this is the other thing, so many people have just lived in an environment where life is something that you get through, and that's not how we're meant to exist. If you're in a space that you're feeling anything less than peace or joy or contentment in the path that you're living, whether it's in work or any facet of your life, right? That's a sign that there is a part of yourself that is unexpressed. And it's worth exploring that, whether it's from, making an energetic shift or feeling like you need to go in for a bit of deeper exploration. But I always recommend starting with looking at where you can make energetic shifts first. I mean, because I do, a lot of different types of work in the Akashic records. And I worked with a client recently where we did some energetic healing in her records. And after 25 minutes into an hour session, she said, "You just changed my life in like 25 minutes." That's how fast it can happen. Everything that we desire or aspire to doesn't have to take a long time, and it doesn't always have to feel like an uphill battle. It can happen very quickly if we're willing to step into the field of possibility.
3D, 5D conversation. Things move faster in 5D. The world is still the same physical reality, but you're doing things that have access to things like that. The Akashic record experience is a time collapse. It's a frequency shift, right? So you shift into something that you've thought was there forever. Well, it was there forever. Eons, really. That's why it's there. And you shift it, right? You've all of a sudden like, whoa, right? But that's the whole point of 5D, where 3D, things have to take forever. There's a system. It's like this. It's like, no, that is the 3D conversation. The 5D is, let's talk about your Akashic record. Let's find it. Let's look into it. 25 minutes in, you've shifted eons of energy, right? Boom. Yeah. I'm always grounding in that so people can see the contrast of that.
Yeah.
Right?
It can happen very quickly. It's really just all about your willingness.
But awareness is first. You have to have awareness first that
Yep.
that's what,
Awareness and then willingness. Yeah.
yeah, willingness, exactly. And that's trust and surrender to what you're being called towards, which is
Yeah.
also just as uncomfortable as a traumatic experience, right? Trauma is very stressful, anxious place. The other one is very fear-based, but they're both the same experience,
Hmm.
right? Shifting, pivotal.
Yes. Yeah. Surrender is something that a lot of people are challenged with as well. I mean, and if you even look at in a dictionary, the traditional definition of surrender, it implies defeat. So here are us and all of these other people talking about, the key, surrender, surrender. And meanwhile, there's so much societal programming around some surrender meaning defeat, right? Like you're giving up your desires, you're giving up what you want. No, it's actually the opposite. Surrender is leaning into that, allowing yourself to receive that, allowing yourself to fully embody the essence of who you are.
Yeah, that's the surrender of the ego, right? When we talk about it like that,
Mhm.
we're surrendering the ego ability to control you and your thoughts and your actions versus surrendering and trusting and feeling something else. The ego always wants to worry, so you surrender the worry. But that's the space everyone's so comfortable with if they don't challenge it, right? Silence is so uncomfortable if you're not comfortable with it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I would just say to anyone listening to this, again, if you're feeling anything less than joy, peace, contentment in your life, in your career, in your business, in any area, it's just a sign that something needs to be acknowledged, and tuning into your heart, into your intuition, your soul's guidance to, honor what it's bringing forward in terms of what that is, and then having the willingness to pursue it. I feel like it's also worth mentioning that something, a lot of people have expectations in relationships that just because it's your spouse or your partner or your sibling, parent, that you should be able to trust them, and that they will automatically understand, whatever it is that you want to confide or convey to them. And sometimes, yes, that's the case. I'm not saying don't trust the people that love you. I'm just saying understand that, everybody is on an individual journey. Everybody emits a different energetic frequency. And so just because they may play a certain role, someone may play a certain role in your life, they may or may not be equipped to hold space for you. So important to keep in mind.
Yeah, that whole conversation's rooted in just owning that this is a selfish journey at the end of the day, but still living within a human experience,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Trust
Yeah.
nobody but thyself, but also trust everybody, kind of a deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
All energetics conversation, though, that's what this is all about, is shifting that personal development conversation from um, personal development, right? Which is think positive, do this, change your circumstances, to the spiritual conversation, which is energetics on every level, energetics of Akashic records, energetics of looking at trauma differently, shifting the word, changing the vibration, right? So this is the contrast in that conversation.
Yes. Yeah. When you're able to make the paradigm shift from being focused on that something is always missing in your life to no, you're actually already a whole sovereign divine being, and that any of these other events or experiences that we're talking about are part of your experience. They don't make you any less than this whole complete being.
Hmm.
Then that's a game changer, because then you're unstoppable.
That is the most powerful and liberating place to be in.
Hmm. Yeah. I feel like that's a good place to
And that's good.
end. Do you have anything else that you're feeling guided to bring forward?
No, I think, the title was Trauma and How Can It Influence You? And what
Yeah.
we're saying is it is your influence, it is your story, it is your guidance. And that's how we change the conversation from looking at it like that. And the personal development books are really good at helping you understand trauma, but that's not what we want. And so I think we did a good job here today. And I'm excited to see all of these blend together because I think they're going to be a powerful series for somebody.
Yeah, I agree. I know that if I had this several years ago, it certainly would have helped me avoid some potholes.
It would have woken me up for sure to some things that maybe I didn't know about, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. But that's how we got here, right? Because all of our experiences brought us
that's
here.
correct. That's correct.
Yeah. Awesome, Danielle. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to everyone who took the time to join us and listen today. And just a reminder that next Thursday we're taking a break, but the last Thursday of this month will be moving into our next and final conversation, which will be around how to reach out for support that's a fit for you. So can't wait to have that conversation again. And thank you so much, Danielle.
Thanks for having me.